Hi, I'm Brent, the Aussie,
Hi, this is Jackie, the Indian.
and together we are mindset motivators,
Yes,
the Aussie and the Indian.
yes.
We've got a really great guest here today. We've got Peter Robinson, 3 times world triathlete, and also represented Australia in the Olympics. So we're going to talk more about him. But Jackie, can you introduce uh,
Yeah, of course.
Robbo's fantastic record as a
Sure,
triathlete?
definitely.
Yeah,
I'm excited for today's episode because you get to meet people like this, those who have achieved so much of success in their life. But as mindset motivators, our goal is not to talk about only triumphs or not only about the success. It's about the mindset behind that success because you and me have come out of the adversity in our own life, you know.
yeah,
So,
yep,
and whatever we have achieved, we have not achieved by, waving the magic wand and got everything right, We have done hard work. We have gone through the tough times. So that's what we're gonna do with Robbo today. Peter Robertson, our Australian mate. He's an Olympian triathlete. Okay, let me run down few stats for
yeah,
you before we get him on the screen.
yep,
He was a part of Summer Olympian in 2000. He was also competing in Summer Olympics 2004. And the best part is that he been placed second number twice in the world championship. Yes, guys, second place.
yep.
That's massive for someone get to that level, and that's the reason why we got him here to talk about that mindset behind all that championships he has competed and to the level he was been. So let's welcome him, let's bring him on the
Yep,
stage.
let's welcome Robbo, 3 times world triathlete champion. What a
Yeah,
legend. Bring him on.
yeah, let's bring it on.
Here he is.
Hey guys,
Yeah. Welcome, Robbo. Welcome, Mike.
thanks guys, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. We just spoke about your achievements and everything like that. And we just want to basically talk about your mindset for success. So,
Sure.
with
Yep.
all of your, and we both share something in common, me and Robbo. Robbo knew a guy, George Zagurski, longer than I did. So, George was a very good mentor of Robbo's, and that's how I met Robbo. And George really taught me focus. So that's one of the mindset things I learned off Robbo's mentor and also mine. And thank you, George, for sharing what you shared with me. And we're probably going to touch on a little bit what George shared with you, Robbo, and the mindset he helped you with as well. But go ahead. So just if you want to share with the listeners your mindset for success, how'd you do it?
Yeah, well, it was a number of factors. I know you've just been talking about George there. Now, I think we need to mention, George isn't with us anymore. So, but
Yeah.
he's definitely left a huge legacy
Yeah.
in a lot of people's lives, including mine.
Yeah.
One of the great things that George was able to instill in me is like just backing up a lot of my own confidence that I did have I met George when I was 17 years old.
Yep.
Which for me, I'm very grateful for because it can be a big time in people's lives, I think, around that age, and you can go in so many different directions. And luckily, I'd already found the sport of triathlon. I had a lot of confidence from the get-go. It was more so, I think, just I loved the sport as soon as I sort of discovered it. I wasn't the greatest athlete at all to begin with. In my first triathlon, I was beaten by a girl, and my dad was sort of maybe recommending that, because I was still deciding whether I stick with cricket. I used to play cricket when I was a youngster, and then I discovered triathlon, and in my first race, it was after that I was deciding whether I would continue with the sport. And my dad, when I got beaten by a girl, my dad's like, "Oh, maybe we'll stick with the cricket," And for some unknown reason, like I just had this confidence that if I improved on some of my weaknesses, that I could actually excel in this sport. And like it was around that time that like I said, I had this confidence that if I did improve on some of my weaknesses, it was more than physical weaknesses at that stage. Like I could barely swim.
Oh wow!
Which is kind of crucial in triathlon, since it's one of the 3 sports involved. So I it was like in those early days, I remember writing this project, and at school, a school project, and we had to. Well, I did this triathlon magazine, and I did a feature article on myself. So it was a great snapshot of what was going through my head at that time. And this is going back 30 years ago now. And in part of the article, I wrote down what my ambitions were in the sport, and my ambition was to be the best in the world. So it was already in there. I just sort of felt like I needed to follow some logical steps and tick a few boxes, and that was the case. But obviously, as you get further down the track, there's a bit more involved than just ticking a few boxes. But George was, he came around at a good time in my life and sort of backed up a lot of the beliefs that I had. And so that was, another helpful way that did put me on the path to success. But it was a long time still, between that initial meetings and before it actually eventuated in real life.
So you're 17 when you started out. It's funny because a lot of people, if their dad said to someone you were going to give up, because a lot of people would have given up beaten by a girl, but you didn't. So you had some inner fire and some inner belief that you knew you were going to achieve. So from that, what age were you, Robbo, when you won your first World Triathlete Championship?
I was 24 when 25. Sorry, 25 when I first won my first world title. I'd been in the sport for close to 10 years, and it was a progression. It was a long progression and a few ups and downs along the way. But again, I had that belief, and again, I mean, I refer back to George because it was a big part of my life, and he did back up a lot of the thoughts that I had, but he was always talking, in like sort of future tense. He was always saying, you're already the world champion. You just got to go and do it physically, but you're already the champion. You're the world champion. It wasn't like, oh, maybe this is going to happen. It's like, and it always amazed me. I could never really get the answer out of him. Is like, how did he know that? Like, I believed that. I could see that in my mind, but how could he see that in my head? That was something that always blew me away.
George, not that George would tell you, but George is actually a psychic medium. He could see the future. Actually, no, Robbo, serious.
I believe it. Yeah, because it was like I'd had these same conversations with my parents, but they couldn't. Maybe I couldn't articulate it to them, or they couldn't understand it. Possibly, parents have a different relationship with their kids, so probably maybe a more conservative option. Whereas George is like, this is going to happen. Go for it. Lucky. No, I'm glad I did.
Yeah, bloody oath, mate. Bloody oath. But George, just for listeners, George was a positional release therapist, a masseur. You could probably expand on this a little bit more. I'm just going from memory, but he used to train athletes in Poland, didn't he? I think he told me once.
Yeah, he had sort of knew everything. Yeah, all different sports, but he had a lot of different influences. It wasn't again, you can't really sum him up in one way or one word, or he's not just one thing. He adapted a lot of different therapies and ways to improve and into his own little special way, and yeah, it worked very well.
It all works. So well done. Now, obviously, when you've had these wins, Robbo, you've obviously had a few struggles along the way. We're just wondering, how did you get through the struggles?
Yeah, well, they're definitely a big part of sport, because there's always going to be hurdles along the way, and I mean, I could probably talk about more hurdles than more successes, in sport, because I like whenever I get introduced now, my career is long finished now, and people talk about, I won 3 world titles, but I was in hundreds of races, and my winning percentage is probably, something like 10%. So there's 90% of races that you aren't winning, or that I wasn't winning.
Yeah.
And so that's still a lot of races. It doesn't mean that if you're not winning, you're not, achieving a goal. I wasn't out there trying to win every race I was going in, but, there was a lot of, disappointing races in there as well. The one that probably sticks out the most in my mind was, I guess, the progression in my career. You obviously, I went through my junior years, and I was a Australian junior champion in my final year as a junior, and then I didn't do too well at the World Championships that year, and then I had a few years before I sort of managed to start performing at the elite level, against all the pro guys. So that was a big step. And then once I did start competing well, I had, it seemed to be quick success. My first World Championship, I finished second. And then the following year, I was on the top step. So the following year, I won my first world title. So this is going back to 2001 now. Yep. And then it was that following year in 2002 where I finished second at the World Championships. And that, you look back at that result and it's a huge result. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But that was one of the most disappointing results in my career. At that time, it was very hard to deal with because it was the first time in my career that I felt like I'd gone backwards. So everything in that point had been going up, I'd finished second, 2 years earlier, but that was a progression on the way up. And then the following year I won. I mean, there's really nowhere else to go apart from a crosswards.
Achieved.
But I felt like I went backwards. So that was a real difficult
situation to deal with. And how did you deal with it, Robbo?
It's just getting back to the basic fundamentals of sport. Like you aren't going to win each race. You need to prepare each time. It's not a given. I mean, I was the world champion, but they don't just give it to you. You have to go and earn it each time. And so it didn't matter what I'd done previously. I had to go out and do it again. But the difference, I guess, that first time when I won the world title, there was always other people I had to beat. And then once I won the first world title, then I became the benchmark. So it's, once you're at the top of the tree, it's like you've got to almost look at yourself to go, well, what do I need to do now to better myself? Because everyone knows what they need, who they need to beat. But when you're trying to beat yourself, it's or when you become the benchmark, it's a whole new ball game. So you and you don't just stay there. You've got to keep improving, like every year. And the sport was still, considered quite young at that stage, but every sport's the same. They never stand still. They're always improving. There's always these fine adjustments, and so you just have to continually look for improvements. And I come back to George again, and he was one of those people who was always coming up with new ideas and refinements. And I always say, I only probably did about 10% of what George told me to do. He had so many ideas, and
I remember.
It was almost too much. Yeah, it was overload. But if I was able to do 10%, I was pretty happy, and I knew I was going to help me. But yeah, it's that continual improvement. It's not always looking for big improvements either. It's just little ones. I didn't need, I was, after finishing second at the Worlds, like, it wasn't like I needed to make big improvements. It's just fine adjustments. I was,
fine tune.
Yeah.
But you found a way, obviously, because you won again and again.
Yeah, the following year I won again. So it was, again, just that adjustment. I think one of the big changes the following time is I moved from Sydney across to Perth, and that was, for me, it was just a fresh environment. So that was one of the changes I made. I think around that time I started coaching myself. So that was another change that I made.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, that's actually quite a big adjustment, to be honest. But it was more the fresh start and just, reinvigorating myself. That's where I felt like I needed it at the time, just to freshen up again.
Yeah, just the changes because of the holiday. So that's good. I want to ask you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Because you had that benchmark set up for you, now there was a pressure of people around you because now you have set the boundaries that this is the best, and now you are competing with yourself. At that moment of time when you were competing, how was you getting the support from people around you? That is because when we are at that level, when we are trying to compete with ourselves, it's very important to have right people around us, because that's the time when you hit yourself hard, that's the time when you go in that panic mode, and that's the time when you need support. And so when I talk about support, it's emotional support, So how was the people around you supporting you at that particular moment when you were trying to compete with yourself and do your best?
Oh, totally. Yeah, you do need to surround yourself with good people, and that's that goes across the board. Yeah, like all the people you're hanging out with, whether it's someone who's got direct influence on what you're doing, your coach or mentor, or often your training partners, but also your friends and partners and everyone around you needs to be a good influence on you, because all those factors influence your performance. So yeah, it's often like the direct people who are the most obvious, your coach and that, they're the easiest ones to realize whether or not they're helping you. But it's often the people that are on that periphery that you think that you can block out or aren't actually having an influence, but that they might be having a bigger influence or, negative influence, if they're, dragging you down and you think, oh, well, they're not, it's not a direct influence, but it is, you know. And
Yeah.
but for me, like one of them, I think there was two main things that I did try to focus on. One, I listened to everyone. You know, it's amazing where you can get advice from. It's amazing. You know, I was the best in the world, and everyone still had a lot of advice for me on how I can be the best in the world still. And it's very interesting at times who will, you know, offer that advice up. But sometimes you get these little snippets that people don't even really realize what they're saying, but they come out with some gems, some real gems. So I did always listen to anyone and everyone.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it came back to me. I was the one who had to make the final decision whether I took it on board or just let it slide. And that was also, you know, with the people who had direct influence over me. Sometimes I had to let some of their advice slide by, but you have to take control. At the end of the day, you have to take control of your career, your life, and filter it all out. And because what works for one person won't work for the next. And so it might be really good advice, you know. I remember when I was at school, you know, my final few years of school, my dad, you know, he wanted me to be an electrician. And an electrician is a very, very good trade. It's a great trade.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not the right trade for me. So it's a terrible trade for me. But I went and became an apprentice electrician, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And it's not the kind of trade you want to not be good at or hate, or else you won't be around for very long. So I worked that out quick enough to get out of that trade. It wasn't the right trade for me. So, but it's not that it's not a good trade. It's an awesome trade, but it wasn't the right one for me. So, you got to pick and choose. You know, like people might give you what seems good advice, but it might not be the right advice for you. It might be something that they wanted to do, or it might be what they wish they did, or something along those lines. But you really need to work out what works for you. And you know, and good mentors will be able to have that connection with you to know to get to know you and get to work those things out, that what makes you tick.
It sounds like you had very good self-awareness, Robbo, and you understood your environment. And obviously when you're winning these world championships, your mindset has to be just focused on the end result, I guess. So you sort of coach yourself along the way a lot.
Yeah, well. You do. Yeah. I thought it was a key part of my career, is just having that focus and the belief. But it's something that I had to constantly work at, and it was something that didn't just stay there as a constant. It ebbed and flowed, and I mean, I had a lot of success at World Championships, but unfortunately, I couldn't replicate that success at the Olympics. So it's not something that was just there. It was something I had to work at, and it was a constant thing that it was always in there somehow, but I had to make sure I tick all the boxes along the way to make it come out at the right times.
And how many hours a day did you train? Including everything, including eating correctly. I'm talking about everything.
Well, everything is 24/7, you know.
Yep.
So it's like, so But physical training, it averaged out to about 25 hours a week.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I felt like I put the extra, and that was pretty standard. That's what the guys and girls were doing around those many hours. Some trained a little more. I wasn't known for overtraining. I just, I had a good coach. I had lots of good coaches along the journey, but one of my coaches was always, telling me just train smart, not hard. So that was good advice, rather than overdoing it. Just do what you got to do.
Yep.
And that was another thing I was able to do in training is, training was exactly that, and just the word training, listen to it, it's training, it's preparation. It's not the race. It's not the event. Don't leave your best performances in training. I saw some guys do some amazing things in training, but then couldn't replicate it on race day. And it was almost like that was their race day, in training. But I was able to, if the session, I was able to listen to what was prescribed in training, even if I was feeling amazing. If I was only meant to do an easy run, I'd go out and do an easy run. I wouldn't be tempted to go, oh, I feel so good today, I should go do a hard run.
Yep.
No, that's coming up. That'll be tomorrow or the next day. The program is written in a certain way that there'll be times to go hard, and that's when you should be ready, and there's times to go easy. And that was something I was able to do, is to listen to the body, and or have control, I guess, over the mind, and go, no, there'll be time you might feel amazing today, but there's a time to use it. So that comes from training the right ways, and then I was able to use that, on the right days racing as well.
Yeah, well done. I want to ask you about the Sydney Olympics. So that was your first Olympics. How excited were you when you got selected, and also how excited were you when you turned up to the village, etc.? And talk about the Olympics here in Sydney.
Oh, it was indescribable. It was huge, because it was the first time triathlon had been in the Olympics, so that was super exciting. It was new for everyone, so no one knew what to expect. And a lot of the older athletes who were more established just went a bit crazy almost, because they started, and this is what happens at the Olympics, and I'm guilty of it too.
Yep.
It does change you. Like, you think, oh, it's the Olympics, I have to do something special. I have to change something, or I have to do that little bit more, but you don't. You just you're racing the same guys. It's still the same distance. Everything's still the same. It's just got a different name.
Yep.
So qualifying was super, probably the most exciting, and qualifying for the Sydney Olympics was my most enjoyable race ever. Because I was such an underdog. At the beginning of that year, beginning of 2000, I was ranked outside the top 200 athletes in the world.
Wow.
I had to go win this race in New Zealand just to get on the start line for the trials. And then so I won that race, and then at the Sydney trials, which was on the Olympic course, so everyone was there and everyone wanted to do well on this course. And I was ranked, but in the race there were 75 guys in the race. I was ranked 71 in the race.
Wow.
And then yeah, I came out and won this race, and it was like, who is this guy? Like,
Where did he come from?
yeah, it was. I was such a nobody. Like the day before the race, the Channel 7 were covering the race. I think it was Channel 7.
Yep.
And they interviewed. There was 8 or 9 Australians, which is a lot in a big race like that. But I think there was 9 of us, and I was the last one that was going to be interviewed by Channel 7. Anyway, so I rock up, was for my interview. They're like, "Oh, it's okay, mate. We've interviewed all the other Aussies. It's all right. You can go back to your hotel room. We don't need any more. We've got enough what we need." I'm like, you sure? Like, yeah, no, it's all right, buddy. You go back. You go on your way. So they refused to interview me. They're like, I was such a nobody. They didn't even want to hear from me. I'm like, are you sure? I'm feeling pretty good. And I'd already publicly told people that I was going to win this race by now.
Wow.
And I was so confident, and yeah, anyway, the next day I won this race. It was huge. And Channel 7 hadn't interviewed me pre-race. And so I had a little dig of him after the race. And as I was walking to all the press conference post-race, I'm like, oh,
yeah.
So you want to talk to me now? At the time, it was pretty funny. Yeah, it went down. It went down well. It wasn't in an arrogant way. It was a very funny.
Yeah.
What a great achievement.
Again, I think I know you guys are asking the questions, but that was something else that was, I guess, quite important. The big races I won it wasn't a shock to me. I always knew that I'd prepared well. I knew what shape I was in, both physically and more so mentally.
Yep.
And I knew I was going to win. Yeah. So, like I said, that race, I'd said during the week, I had been interviewed by a journalist before that race, and I told her exactly what I was going to do. I told her I was going to win the race, and yeah, again, it wasn't in an arrogant way. It was just a confident, I knew that I was ready. I knew that I could do it. And yeah, again, it's an important part of having that mindset of just knowing if you've done the right preparation, that you can perform well and achieve what you set out to. But it happened numerous times. Every world title I won, I knew I was going to win, and I have evidence of that. I've publicly stated it. I know I have. Yeah, there's newspaper articles that I think I still have that said before the race, and it's now I know lots of people might say that, but there's just a knowingness, there's a way you can say it that I am going to win this race. It wasn't arrogance. The downfall to that was that journalist who I did tell, she would ask me before every big race, then, oh, are you going to win this? Are you going to win this? And it's not a question that you can be asked. It's something you need to tell. Because of course, every time I'm going into a big race, I'm already there, I'm already there mentally. And I know I'm going to win, or if I'm not quite there yet, I'm still trying to convince myself, before the race that I'm going to win. And so I always knew that if always knew when I was going to win, and it wasn't that I was sabotaging myself, but there were the times when I knew I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to convince myself that I'm going to win. And yeah, that's the thing as an athlete, you never give up, you know. You keep trying to convince yourself right until the start line that you're going to win. Sometimes you might surprise yourself, but it didn't happen to me very often. It was I kind of always knew, you know, weeks before the event that, yep, everything's clicking, everything's on track. As long as I just keep on this pathway, then yeah, I'm going to win. You know, it was pretty obvious to me. It was it was a good place to be in. Yeah.
Well done. So you've mentioned a few things there. Basically, and this is one that I've used, Robbo, never give up. So when you've had some struggles or hurdles, as you called it, use a lot of affirmations. So the I am, you predicted what your future looked like. And you just said, I am the world champion in a different way, whatever what your way was. But you sort of had that sort of helped that inner knowing. So, yeah, I love it, mate. So you went through some ups, you had lots of ups and you had a few downs. And it sounded like coming second in the world championship was one of your biggest downs, even though because he'd won the year before. So that was very interesting to share that. And when you said that, I thought of Roger Federer. I don't know how he stayed on top of the tennis tree for so long. Like, it's tough, isn't it? It's harder being up the top.
Yeah. It's much easier not being at the top. Yeah. The way up is the easiest pathway. Yeah.
Jackie Chan, you want to ask anything?
Yeah, I just want to ask the last question to Robbo is that who was you looking up to when you were practicing, you were doing your training, you know, because we always have a mentor or the coach we look up to, but we have, you know, you were in the Olympics, you were in the, you know, triathlete, and you must be looking at someone that I want to be like him one day, or I want to, you know, rub shoulders one day after I win the world championship. So, who was that one person you were looking up to while you were practicing and doing your training?
Well, yeah, I guess because I started the sport in the early 1990s.
Yeah. Yep.
And so through that era, you know, there was one particular athlete who was quite dominant. That was a guy from England, Simon Lessing.
Yep.
So he was probably someone I aspired to be like. I was always careful not to idolize people. There were people who were considered idols of the sport, or you know, and I knew who they were, you know, phenomenal athletes, but I knew I wanted to beat them, so I didn't want to idolize them, put them up on some pedestal, because there's going to come a time where I had to race these guys, and I wanted to beat them. It didn't mean that I didn't respect them. I had a lot of respect and admiration, but I didn't idolize them, and I didn't want people to do the same to me either. I didn't want people to put me up on a pedestal either. Because but yeah, in saying that, and the mindset can be a powerful way in a positive way. It can also be a powerful way in a negative way. So I don't want to finish on a negative aspect, but I think it's important. I think it's important that you understand that it can work both ways. It's not just
exactly right.
All positive. You know, if you think about a negative thing, it will happen. And just quickly, so Simon Lessing, who's this guy who I did look up to, and you know, early in my career, I did race him only a handful of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, and he beat me every time. you know, he was at the tail end of his career, and I was sort of in the mid to almost in the golden years. I would say of my career. You know, his golden years were through the 90s, and mine were through the beginning of the 2000s or 90s.
Yeah.
You know, from 2000 to sort of 05, 06 was my golden years. And that was around the time I was racing Simon. Yeah, just it was very sporadic, you know. But yeah, I never beat him. Yeah, so maybe I did idolize him too much. You know, maybe I did put him up on that pedestal. But yeah,
but you know, it was the great share. You know, man, this is hitting hard. You know, the thing you just said about idolizing people, and because you are absolutely right. The sports, you know, industry and the people like you, when they idolize, they also compete with their idols one day.
Yeah.
You know? And that mindset might take over when you are fighting with your idol in the same ring, you know. Oh my, that's powerful, you know. That's really, and people are trying to copy nowadays, you know. People trying to copy their idols, their coaches, their gurus, you know, but they don't realize that when you copy, you are also putting yourself at a risk, because there will be a day when you will be competing with that guru, that coach, that idol, you know. And when you will, on that day, when the day will come, you might be not able to put your 100% because your subconscious mind is not ready now to compete with that person, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I love you sharing that, Robbo.
Yeah,
thanks. I think that's was amazing, Brent.
Yeah, I loved it. I
really
loved
appreciate it.
Yeah. We didn't actually touch on Robbo. What we didn't talk about how long did you swim? Give us the breakdown of the legs.
The distance of the event. So the main event I was racing was called the Olympic distance or standard distance. So it's a 1,500 meter swim, 40K cycle, and a 10K run. And I mean, those distances are, you know, for someone training 25 hours a week, they're very achievable. The distance, it's not the distance, it is, you know, it's the speed and the speed. And the other thing that was a big factor was the tactics, and that was something that I enjoyed. And again, you know, I had good influences around me who taught me some good ways of working out the tactics in the sport. And again, that's a whole nother kettle of fish of mindset and mind games. And yeah, I loved playing mind games with my competitors, both pre-race and during the race. There's so much going on which you can't necessarily see from the sidelines.
Well, we might have to get you on and talk about tactics one day, Robbo.
The
tactics for winning.
We might have to do a whole session on tactics.
We got lots to do with you, Robbo.
I've just opened up a can of worms, didn't I?
You did, mate. You did. Yeah. All right. We'd like to thank Peter Robertson, 3-time world triathlete, for coming on. So thanks, Robbo. We appreciate your time. Robbo's actually, what are you doing? You're building a house, you're farming flat out, and you've got a new child. So it's pretty busy. So we appreciate taking some time out of your day. No
worries.
We loved having you on the Aussie and the Indian. So
excellent. Good luck, guys. Appreciate
the
invite. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. See you. Take care.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.